Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Korra fan commentary track video. This one's going to be for K307 original Airbenders. So if you have other episodes of Avatar and Korra you want me to do in future editions of this commentary track series, let me know in the comment section below. But to sync up your copy of the episode with this commentary track, have your copy of the episode ready to go, including the introduction to this episode, whether that be your Netflix stream, your DVD, your Blu-ray. Have it ready to go at the very start of this episode that you can just hit play and the episode starts. That's the way I have it set up myself. I'm going to finish up this intro in just a little bit for the video, then there'll be about a 10-second pause with no audio, and then when I start speaking again after that pause, that's when I'm going to hit play, that's when you should hit play, and we should be synced up. So, bringing the introduction of the video to an end, after the pause and you hear me speak again, you hit play, I hit play, and we should be synced up. Okay, so here we are with K307 Original Airbenders. This is an episode I do really like. On my list, I think it's in or around number 37 on the list. The thing with this episode is that it really hits a lot of the beats that I want out of an episode of Avatar. Focus on Airbender culture. This is an aspect of Book 3 I really, really like, the return of the Airbenders. The problem is that this really is the only episode in like the sort of middle to late part of Book 3 that focuses on this. This episode has a lot to do on its own of characterizing these airbenders so that you care about the whole group enough that come the end of the season you don't want the group to be taken by Zahir and used as hostages and whatever. The problem though is just that there's 3 or 4 plot threads in this episode, and it really has a lot to do. It has to be Jinora focus, it has to be Kai focus, Boomy focus, Tenzin focus, because there's no other episodes really as we move on after this that focus on stuff outside of, in the finale, Jinora of course gets to be essential to the resolution. That's what really earns her tattoos after the setup from this. Kai, of course, does some stuff in terms of with the bison saving everyone towards the end, but there's no focus beyond this. I think we should have had at least 2 or 3 episodes, I think, focusing on the Airbenders. Given that you didn't have a lot of setup to do with the Red Lotus, that you weren't really going to go into them all that much, I do feel it is something that you should have done is focus a little bit more on this stuff, where there's so many cool new characters, finally a chance to really explore airbender culture. There's so many options because you have Kai as a new airbender, as a kind of one of the main cast this season, Jinora on the verge of becoming a master, getting Iki her chance to shine, Milo, that sort of thing, and the Sky Bison. But as it is, in the little bit I mentioned earlier on, I didn't even mention that there's the whole bison hunter plot towards the end that adds action into the episode. This episode hits a lot of beats. And then I think the one thing I would say is that I think it was a mistake to have this episode take place before Opal arrives. I think Opal should have been included in this Airbender training episode, because I don't like how it's such a big decision for her to finally arrive and leave, Zaofu, make her decision, and then all of a sudden the next time we see her she's just captured, and it was just oh yeah, she was introduced to the group, I suppose she's had some training, but it's fine. But yeah, Guru Lahima, some mention here, Tenzin being caught up on everything. And yeah, the main conflict of this episode again is like Tenzin in training Korra. He is struggling to apply his own passion for his culture to other people and do it differently. We saw this, of course, earlier on in the season with him trying to just recruit the other airbenders in the first place, and we're seeing it again here. I like that they mention Opal, but she would have been so cool to have here, of like having her meet the other characters and see her just get started full stop. Korra has given her a little bit of training, but she has to start it all here. That would have been a nice thing to see, of like show her growth in comparison to, say, Kai, who's like the natural talent. And I like Korra here. You know, Korra's making some good decisions of just like, use the other people that you have. Use Bumi's leadership skills that he has from the military. Use the kids to get more of the fun stuff out. Because like Janora's basically a master at this point, and the other kids are definitely the most skilled of the Airbenders. And that's definitely like a Aang line. He has a similar one in Avatar. But yeah, this is a key episode for Janora and Kai's dynamic. Of just, you know, it's easy to sort of characterize Janora as just a sort of goody two-shoes of the Airbenders, but it's nice to see, you know, Kai bring out that little bit more of a sort of rebellious streak, and sort of just standing up for herself and not just accepting everything that Tenzin says. You really do get to see her growth across book 2 and 3, to the point where ending on her getting her tattoos is such a big moment. But yeah, the spirits here around Janora, of course, she's so spiritual, it makes sense. But yeah, the Sky Bison calves. And so obviously, like, we do get introduced to Lefty is one of these. It's unclear of if like Juicy and Pepper are the other two or not. It sort of fits with the idea that like we basically see going into like book 4, 3 of the new Airbenders have Bison. You know, Opal has Juicy, Janora has Pepper, and Kai has Lefty. But we really only get sort of an origin story in a way for Lefty. And yeah, he's just pointing out that, like, as far as I'm aware, you are a master because you've learned a new technique and are, like, one of the best we've seen. You shouldn't be, like, considered just like one of the rest of us. You're so much better than everyone. And again, like, Bumi ends up sort of being, like, that sort of midway gap between sort of, like, the leadership of the Air Nomads and then the actual, like, new recruits. So use that to your advantage, that he's a more natural sort of people person than Tenzin is. Admiral Chong Natural Leadership Award. And instead of like getting him involved, he just asks for Bumi's advice, which is not really what Korra said. So you see the problems that are coming in. Korra ultimately got a lot of value out of learning airbending through using the sort of pro-bender style, and Tenzin was okay with that, but here he's just taking like a bit of a jokey response from Bumi, whereas like Bumi in action represents a better kind of leader. Nice airbending horn blast there though. And yeah, like he becomes the taskmaster here, and this is not really the idea that was needed, of like switching from sort of the more boring aspects of the culture to like slave driving them almost. Like it's not the approach that's needed. But it is a nice arc for Tenzin to accept that, like, across book 2 and 3, it's not all about him, that he has to use others to get that advantage, whether that be Korra in some cases, Janora in others, or Bumi in others. That he's not Aang, he's Tenzin, and he has to do things his way, and his family's part of that. And yeah, airbender breathing control. That's why airbenders don't often really need to use the winter clothing. That explains like Aang and like the South Pole and stuff like that. And it makes sense, like, you know, this sort of meditation, some of this stuff. It's a part of airbender training, of course, but so it's about the way you introduce it. And that's why I think his conversation with Pema coming up is very, very important. of just him getting some perspective on that. At least this is sort of like practical training here. It's a bit, torturous in a way, but like, the airbenders are about that sort of balance while doing the spiral motion in your hands. It's airbending training, but, it's a bit still task mastery. Yeah, a little hard. And you can see there's a little bit of doubt in his mind of just like, this is the way to do it. But Janora's kind of like, I don't think this is the best approach. And she's just standing in the background. She probably has some great ideas, but he's not willing to take it on board. Here we see Dahl getting his head shaved. Kai is the sort of, bad influence kind of, but ultimately sort of helps Janora to grow. Of like Janora standing up to Tenzin here, of not being treated as good as she is a big moment. And I like that they note here that, like, okay, he's made some sort of allowances for, like, it's a personal choice. You don't have to go through every single aspect of this. It's a little bit more freeing the way it is right now. And yeah, a little bit sort of dismissive, and she's just kind of like, okay, you won't take my advice, I'll rebel against you even more. And this is like if you're getting hit by one of those bells is pretty crazy. This is probably one of the few moments you kind of see that sort of sense of like, this kind of highlights that lineage of the Northern Air Temple of like the Mechanist and Teo and stuff like that, the technology. This is one of the few times we really get that sense. Because otherwise in this episode it feels like, shouldn't the Mechanist people sort of still be there, like a small part of their culture? Why aren't they there anymore? Obviously, with the war over, they maybe could leave and go their own way, but I would have liked an explanation. But there's at least a slight sense of something with sort of the contraptions on this obstacle course in or around the mountain range. And like Boomy has to go through the same sort of training as all the sort of younger recruits, and he's just like, he's done with it. Like, him being treated that way, he's not going to accept that, especially like from Tenzin. And like, this is Boomy's dream, and sort of like it's the sense of like Tenzin is sort of ruining it for him and sort of everyone. That it's been a big decision for them all to come out here, and now he's really being very harsh with everyone. And she's asking the question. It's like, yeah, sure. So what about my tattoos? And he's just like, okay. It's putting these ideas into your head. And he's just like, oh, nope. But key line here. And like, that's the thing, like, in terms of spirituality, she is better than him. He acknowledged that in the last season. And this is her wanting to be accepted of just like, I can do exactly what you're doing, but probably better because they'll relate to me a little bit more. But yeah, Kai and Janora's relationship is really nice. I hope in the upcoming comics we can get a little bit more focus on them. Because it really wasn't a focus in book 4, unfortunately. But here's the Sky Bison poachers or hunters, whatever way you want to call them. To add a bit of drama into the episode, allow the Airbenders to come together to solve an issue with two of the sort of best members kind of taken out. So this is a Gonbat, or Gombat, whatever way you want to pronounce it, the main poacher. You can see he's wearing the Sky Bison kind of fur from, I suppose, the tail sort of area. It's pretty like, ugh. don't go after sort of endangered animals. Really nice shot of the air temple there. And I think this is the Pema scene. Yeah. I really like this one. Like, we don't get a lot on, I suppose, the dynamics of Pema and Tenzin's relationship too much. But this is pretty good. And yep, that it is a little bit of an out there culture. Backstory for Pema. Of like, it's a huge change to go from potentially being from, say, the Fire Nation or the Earth Kingdom to suddenly, Republic City or whatever, to being an air nomad and the aspects of the culture. Of like, be patient. That's Tenzin's line from like the first book. But it shows that like that's exactly the advice that he needed, to just be better with them. And you see, Boomy even has a better spiritual connection with Boomju there. And just the other recruits view them as a couple, basically. And I really like that line. But yeah, poor baby Bison. Bison steak. And then like poor Bosco, if that's the story of what actually happened to Bosco, if like she ate him as soon as Quay died, that's awful. The one thing you sort of celebrate her death later on for is just like, why would you do that to Bosco? But here's an impressive use of her signature skill. Her spirituality. And just that idea of like her sort of being able to just sort of focus and just, immediately a spirit kind of comes to her and she can make the connection this way. Little bit of an awkward situation to do her full, astral projection. But I suppose she learns to do it, in a pretty heated situation later on, so she's still sort of growing even then. And this is Boomy's chance to show his sort of leadership of the group here. What he can do. Because the group has the respect for him. And you can see that like they're kind of interested in that idea. They want to make that connection, and like that's something Tenzin can't do, but it is something Boomy can and Jinora can. And it's just cool to see like a squad of airbenders kind of go out in the mission with some bison. Not particularly trained here, with only a few of them able to actually do moves, I suppose, but it's a good scene to show the rebirth of the Air Nation here. Otaku with a pretty valid statement there. And yeah, just, we're a new nation, but we're together. And yep, Milo with the perfect statement this time. They're so few in number, they're not going to let anyone get taken. Kai with his lock-picking skills. But yeah, really cool airbending sort of, armbar kind of takeover there by Kai. Really nice moves. Korra does a kind of armbar kind of throw like that against Kuvira in the finale, book 4 finale as well. But yeah, we see that like the value of the the bald head sensing stuff really nicely, and then airbending dodge, really nice slow motion stuff, and just that a lot of these have the basics of airbending down, of just, you know, airbending, you know, basic strikes should be, you know, open palm and stuff like that. You know, Jinora and Milo doing a lot of the big moves and just letting more airbenders, you know, show the value of their skills. It's well done of like utilizing the most talented people effectively. But yeah, here's Kai with his glider, of course. It's just cool seeing so many bison around. Baby bison, full-size bison. Again, I do sort of wonder, like, it'd be cool to have Opal in this episode as more of maybe like a beginner, of like seeing her get a chance to do something, because, as I said, the stuff that we see of her when she's with the Airbenders is kind of just her getting captured, and then she's just there sort of at the end, despite it being an arc of her wanting to go train. But yeah, what are the bison gonna do to this guy? And then we see sort of angry Kai here, but Tenzin more respects the technique of what Kai does here, of like he's showing very high skill level despite being so new to it. But you need some restraint. And just shows that, like, of the Airbenders, you have to be like, okay, you've got Jinora, but also you would say Kai, Milo, Opal are like your most talented of the new batch of Airbenders. And now it's a popular thing to do because he did such a cool move. And just Boomy actually showing some traits of Aang here now that he is an Airbender. And it's just a really nice moment between, you know, the brothers there, of just like, yes, Boomy finally feels like a part of something now. He can really accomplish stuff. He's already accomplished a lot in his life with the military, but now what he's always wanted to do. And just a nice apology here between the two of them. But like, yeah. And he's like, you're right there, I suppose. We'll think about it, but... And she does get it at the end, but it's a positive thing. And yeah, I like this thing because it shows you that, like, the sky bison flying is them bending. The fact that they're just kind of floating in the air, like, it's not because of like the motion of their tail or anything like that. They do just kind of naturally float with air bending, which I think is always cool to see, in the same way that the badger moles are actually able to properly manipulate and do earth bending, and the dragons can, you know, not just breathe fire but like do fire tornadoes and stuff like that. It's really cool to see the bending animals actually like do stuff as well. And just that comparison between, you know, the episode having a focus on the bending animal for Airbenders with the sky bison, and then showing the, you know, the air nomads as the benders, the return of, you know, human Airbenders. It's a pretty, you know, symbolic episode. But, you know, at the end of the episode, it feels like that was it. Like, that was all you had this season with this. Like, we focused on it a lot early on, but then when we got there, it was just this one episode. And then they do skip past stuff like Opal arriving and making a big deal about that, of her arriving. You'd think Tenzin would maybe have a bit more of a... They'd want to focus on, like, the arrival of her getting to meet the likes of Kai and everyone else, but it's unfortunate that they don't. I just feel that if you had had more episodes this season or used the time more effectively, I think there was a way to do a little bit more here with what you had going on. Like I said, there's so much in this episode that it feels like it probably should have been a two-parter. Just the fact that you had Tenzin struggling with how to teach, Boomy getting to prove himself, Janora wanting to prove herself, Kai also getting to stand out in the episode. And they accomplish it, I think, pretty well just in one episode, but it also feels very packed just in this one episode, whereas it could have been more spread out, and it would have been, I think, more impactful in the end if you had had more setup for this when you finally get around to the finale, and ultimately it is Korra in combination with the new Air Nation that takes it here down. Just because it feels like once we hit the Red Lotus's like plot being revealed, the Air Nation pretty much is just there as, you know, a group to be held hostage and then break out and turn the tides, which works to a degree, but they never really emphasize that in regards to, I suppose, mainly, you know, Zahir and airbending and his own relationship with the culture and the form and stuff like that. He just is a good airbender and gets flight, and they show his interest in Lahima, but there's not a clear-cut like connection made like you'd think. It just, there's a slight disconnect in that sense, and that's probably the one issue like with book 3, is that like I like a lot of these side plots, the return of the Airbenders, the Lin and Sue stuff in Zhao Fu, the introduction of Kai and Opal and all these characters, but it very much is that case of the Lin and Sue stuff is the 2 episodes before this. Then we have this episode here right in the middle of the season is the one airbending training episode. And then finally after this they decide, let's finally, you know, explain a little bit about the Red Lotus. And then they're the focus, but they haven't had enough setup, and we kind of wish, like, could we have a little bit more with the sisters, or could we have a little bit more with the Airbenders? And they're just a bit lost about how to exactly tackle it. At least that's my thoughts on it, and that's the only thing that I think holds this episode back, is just that it does feel like it has to accomplish everything on this side of the plot, and that it could have been just a little bit better done, but it still has some great moments. But they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.